Dr. Marcel van der Watt is the president and CEO of the National Center on Sexual Exploitation in Washington, D.C. He brings decades of experience addressing sexual exploitation, organized crime, human trafficking, and online criminality. His professional background includes so many things, including work as a police investigator, hostage and suicide negotiator, criminal case consultant, researcher, trainer, and expert witness. I'm going to say I want to jump right in with Dr. van der Watt. I'm going to say endsexualexploitation.org is the website, but I'll have all the information in the body of the video so everybody out there, all you warriors, can take your time and read up about the great work being done at the center. So let's just get to it. Welcome, Marcel van der Watt, back. I'm going to say back to the warriors.
Thanks, Lynn. Great to be here.
I want to ask you about last week. There was a memorandum that came out of the White House about you will fill us in because you are the expert, of vetting and organized crime and transnational crimes. And we're going to go full force after everybody, including, going after those who cause sextortion. And I was so impressed because I know NCOSE, short everybody for National Center on Sexual Exploitation, was really part of giving the White House directly recommendations back in, I believe, November. And would you walk us through this process? Because I think this was really great last week. Now, coming full forward, things are finally happening. It gives us a lot of hope. So, Marcel, what was that like?
Full circle, really. And we're very excited about that, Lynn. So, November 7 last year, we were invited to brief the White House. It included the National Security Council, the Homeland Security Council, and specific staff members of Vice President J.D. Vance's office. So we were invited to discuss the issue of sextortion, and the nucleus of what we shared with the White House was that this is not a new phenomenon. And obviously, I did a lot of work on the African continent dating back 20 years, and we know that sextortion is not a new thing. I think the word was coined about 11 years ago already. And so in the period 2014, 2015, 2016, a lot of these reports stemmed from military personnel being approached online, typically, a woman, reaching out, sharing pornography, and then these soldiers usually on military bases outside of the United States, they would then be confronted by members of usually West African syndicates, Ivory Coast or Nigeria, or criminals in the Philippines, being extorted or sextorted for money. And as we here at the NCOSE did work over the years on sextortion, I just realized that dating back as far back as 2002, that I dealt with what we called analog style sextortion in South Africa, where Nigerian criminal networks would basically do what they're doing now, but they would do this offline, where they would use trafficked women or trafficked children to lure politicians, people of influence, or even senior officials in the police to a location where there was going to be, undressing and rape or sexual intercourse. And then as soon as the man is undressed, the guys would swoop into the room. They would have their guns pointed, and this person would then be forced, both of them, the victim and the target. And then this would be recorded, and that recording would then be used to extort or sextort money, intelligence, documents, etc. Now, this happened 22 years ago, when I worked on the African continent. But now what we're seeing, it's the same groups that's now merging online, and it's really almost perfected how they do that. And we know that a lot of those targets are American, teens, young boys, young girls, but also adult men. So we basically went to the White House and said, listen, this forms part of there's a historicity to this and how these groups work. We compiled a 2-page memo. We briefed the White House, and we made some very strong recommendations in terms of asymmetrical tactics to actually confront this issue.
So I must ask, so take us now to today. What happened? Because the White House put out a memo, put out something back in March. Now we're here in
Yeah.
almost September. Things are moving along quickly, in my opinion. Where are we now with what was put out last week? Because again, we want to focus this. Also, review a little bit more about sextortion because, Marcel, I explain this every day to people,
Mm.
and they're still a little bit like in denial or not sure about it, or frankly, I think so scared of it they close their ears and eyes. You know what I mean? They don't want to, but it has moved from what you described, right, back in maybe 2002 into the bedrooms of our homes because our teens
Yeah.
are on their computers and things like that. And we even have kids sextorting their peers now. It's moved at such scale. So I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but go a
Yeah.
little bit into all of that for us. So I really want our warriors out there to understand this is happening in every town, community, rural area across America. A lot of it's happening and a lot goes unreported. It is a crisis. So speak to that a bit.
It is absolutely a crisis, and it's totally globalized. So meaning that you might be, in the throes of being sextorted, and ostensibly by somebody online in your neighborhood, in your country. In fact, it could be thousands of miles away. There really is no boundaries. So it's almost become ubiquitous in the online sexual extortion marketplace. And I always tell people that there's 100 reasons why parents would know when a child might be sextorted. I mean, unfortunately, we see an increasing number of these young men, young boys, die by suicide. But save for that, you often have behavioral changes, and people would report that something is just off here. So parents could be asking questions, and eventually a disclosure might follow where young boys or young people might disclose that they are on the throes of being sextorted. But I would also say that there's 100 reasons why we don't know about how many adults are being sextorted. So there's a whole crisis there that we're not even talking about. But in terms of young people and children, we know that sextortion is now. If you look at who these perpetrators are, we just look at West African syndicates, those from Southeast Asia or the Philippines. Sextortion is arguably the easiest low-hanging fruit of criminal activities to get involved in. You need very little resources. You just need access to people who would respond to messages, whether that's on Facebook or on other platforms. So it's very easy for criminal elements to get into a space where they have a plethora of options in terms of young people to sextort. So yeah, that's the reality. It's just part of a vast criminal pipelines of criminal activities, but it's just one of those easy ones to target vulnerable, unassuming young people. So
Yeah, and especially since a lot of our youth, our young people, put their entire lives online. You know what they had for dinner. It's everything. It makes it very easy for these criminals to pick up on that. And I heard that it's primarily teenage boys from like middle to maybe what's perceived as better neighborhoods because these criminals think they actually will have the pocket money. You know what I
yeah,
mean to do that. And we have too many stories we both know.
totally.
Children will not come forward. They'd rather, which I find so astounding, Marcel, they'd rather kill themselves than go to a parent and say, I did this. But that's for another program that goes into mental health and all of that stuff. So would you say sextortion? We want everybody to understand it's really about coercion. It's forcing. It's from what I hear, they are nonstop. What I've been told by parents when they were able to go back and look at their phones or their computers, they pile on, and this young brain just can't take all this pressure. And this is, I mean, to me, this is a national security crisis as well, that we're allowing the criminal networks. Who knows what else? We've got AI now. I know, again, I'm going all over the place, but I'm just thinking like, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely, look, there's different ways. I always, always use the example of, from a sociological perspective, a diamond, you have to pick it up, flip it around, turn it around to always see a different dimension and a different kind of shine to it. And I mean, sextortion is just one of those things where, I mean, I would argue, and we have conversations here at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, before the phenomenon of sextortion, we had human trafficking, where we now have a principal diplomatic tool where we hold countries accountable because it's a transnational crime. It's a complex crime, and we have foreign governments that, by implication, if they don't do something and they don't address the syndicates in their countries, inevitably that will affect the national security, the safety of US citizens, and the integrity of our borders. Now, I think since human trafficking, sextortion is now the very next issue that presents the same multidimensional complexities. And I do think that the national security piece of that is even more acute. Because, to your point, these perpetrators many of them are loosely connected pieces, part of a criminal network. Some of them are really part of well-structured criminal networks, and they intentionally target. They're very specific with who they target. I mean, every minute is a possibility of making money. So if they are able to identify a profile of a young person, an adult that is clearly vulnerable in terms of relationally, they've got a big following on social media. The adult person might be married, or he might be working at the Pentagon. If you are able to sextort a person like that, where there is, intimate, non-consensual images that they find in their hands, they will be relentless in terms of non-stop threats, coercion, trying to get money. And that is overwhelming. And that's why we see some of these young people die by suicide within an hour. And I believe there's a hidden number, dark number of adults that we don't know about. And it's all about its money. And I would say the piece that we are not talking about maybe is even how children have access to sensitive information in the hands of their parents, but also soldiers and police officials, people with security clearances are effectively targeted by these groups. So by implication, it has a national security implications to it. And the interesting thing is when the Washington Times op-ed that I wrote a few months ago about pornography as a national security threat. Now, the pornography industry went up in arms about this article, and but by the very nature, again, pornography, that's always the entry point here for the children. I mean, by implication, we are talking about pornographic imagery and images. That is the lure to get them into that compromising situation. Now, when you're talking about pornography and the link with sextortion, we already know what pornography does to societies, Lynn. It creates brittle societies, relationships, marriages, the nucleus of the family, falls apart. So on a granular societal level, brittle societies that are not able to confidently look after themselves, there's a national security risk there, I would argue strongly. But if you go from the top and you think about federal government and the military, if you put all of these things together and you look at pornography in the seamless interspersion with sextortion, we are talking about a national security threat here. There's no two ways of looking about it. And that's what makes it so exciting to see how the current administration is prioritizing it. And to the tactics and the language that NCOSE has proposed during our meeting at the White House is the exact language and the tactics that's now going to be embraced. So we are very, very excited about that.
Yeah, I'm so happy when I saw that, what they call a memorandum, recently. I'm like, things are moving along. If you had to address somebody in a practical term, right? Because we talk about these things all the time, so we know about them. But I'm very concerned about the public, Marcel, We need to bring more of them into the fold and also help us with all of this. We know, just to go back on the pornography for a minute, we know algorithms are feeding our children pornography.
Oh, yeah.
Parents will say to me, I don't want to talk about pornography and open that can of worms. I'm like, they're seeing it anyway because it's being fed to them through algorithms. We have studies about all of this. Or their friend is showing them on the school bus, something. So we're not shielding the kids. So we might as well get in there and talk open and honestly about everything. To somebody out in the public, well, the White House is far away from them, right? So they're thinking about putting food on the table and paying the rent and all that kind of thing. Give us some practical terms, why this is so urgent. Do you think right now we are in a position where, because I think things are speeding up and we are seeing a lot of progress and hope. What do you want to tell everybody about a year from now? What do you envision will be happening with all of this? Because now we're bringing in the AI, which is complicating everything, in my warrior's opinion. It has added another layer to safety and security, and we're trying to put AI in the classrooms. So what do you want to tell people? And I'm very serious about that, because they'll say to me, there's too much information going on. I can't keep track. Therefore, they don't listen, or they don't watch videos because it's too much for them. Lay it out a little bit, like where you think in the next 12, I'm not holding you to anything, where you think this will all go in the next 12 months.
So firstly, to the parent who feels overwhelmed by all of this, let's just start there. Just the overwhelming universe of information and not knowing how do I even start to vet this information? What is AI slop? What is vetted? What is evidence? Please do go to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation's Parent Center, parentcenter.org, and really ask these questions. Ask practical questions, whether it's your own concerns, whether it's something you overheard in a conversation between your child and a neighbor's child, or whether there's a very real issue of pornography in the home and maybe with a child. Please do go and use the Parent Center. And why I'm using the Parent Center as a go-to, Lynn, it's these vetted resources, about 20 agencies and companies that are philosophically aligned in terms of the harms of pornography. So please go there and use that for all intents and purposes, pragmatically and practically. But the one thing that is encouraging, Lynn, is the fact that I think there's a sleeping giant of common sense waking up in terms of understanding that pornography has always presented us with a host of fleeting promises, and it never delivers. Pornography never loves you back. It harms. It has very, very real implications just from an emotional level on relationships. We know now the well-researched theme of neuroplasticity and how it literally has the capacity to change how we think about thinking and the brain, and by implication it changes the way we view the world. It changes. It is really antithetical. If we yearn for a society of human dignity and human flourishing, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I'm telling you now that pornography is the antithesis of everything that presents and that we pursue there. It breaks, it corrodes, and it does very, very real harm. And that's why you have organized criminal networks that pounce on pornography as the medium to exploit and to disrupt and to break down. So it's from a criminal perspective, it's the logical go-to non-threatening tool to use to find its way into the brain, into the family. So where are we from? I mean, predicting a year from now, I do think that the changes that we are seeing now at federal level is they are really seeing the problem for what it is. We always talk about addressing the system of sexual exploitation. And this is a complex system. And we're not just talking about pornography. We're talking about child-on-child sexual abuse. What children see, often there's an acting out. There's a recording. There's a sharing of images. There's also evidence of prostitution, eventually the purchasing of sex and sex trafficking. So you have to address this as a complex system. Now, the following is important. If you want to address a complex system, you have to be able to create a system or a response system that looks remarkably similar to the one that you're trying to address.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it remains a David versus Goliath battle. And I think what we are seeing here with the administration and the way that they are addressing the sextortion issue now is exactly that. They are going increasingly toe to toe in terms of the level of sophistication, the level of complexity with which they meet these criminal networks. They're using, I mean, part of what they're doing, they're using vetted third-party corporate cybersecurity experts, and they're co-opting these guys, deputizing people, hopefully all of this come into play, to help fight this fight. We all know that the problem is of such a magnitude that capacity in federal government, and in terms of just enumerating how many cybercrime experts there are, it's minute, minuscule, comparable to the enormity of these networks. So the fact that we are now recognizing that, listen, we need help, and they are getting others from private security, private industries to help with this is quite remarkable. And I think once you've got people addressing the problem from all of these different dimensions, that's where we get evidence, that's where we get data to, you know, to weave back into knowledge and awareness. What are the new tactics being used, you know? So these are exciting times, and I think for the public, it's just to keep informed and be kept informed, and, you know, form part of Lynn's warriors. And you know, this is where we really, I mean, Lynn, you are really doing a great job in just keeping people up to date with unfolding news and contemporary issues and new tactics and methods and modus operandi. So yeah, it's just constantly being kept up to date. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, Marcel, look, I can't do my job at the Warriors without you doing your job at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Again, you know, I've interviewed for the Parent Center. All of this will be linked in the body because we always give out resources. All like the free resources we can give out, we always supply at the Warriors. I think there's a lot of hope right now. We do have a White House that has an open door, wants to hear about these issues, wants help, wants to bring people to the table. I think that's very exciting. I want to finish with something, see if you agree with me, because I do work with a lot of parents and talk to a lot of parents. No matter how much you pay a sextortionist, I guess this goes for adults too, it doesn't matter. They'll never stop. They'll just keep asking and asking. So paying them $50, $500, $10, it's not going to ever stop them. Can you finish with that? Because I've heard too many stories where kids are trying to pay. They do pay. And then they get to a point where I don't have another $100. And instead of going to the parent or the trusted adult, they kill themselves. And we cannot have that. Would you agree with what I just said? They'll never stop, these sextortionists. So it's best. What is the plan to, you know, block them, walk away, report to your parent? What does one do if this happens to them?
Yeah, Lynn, I think the first thing is just, you know, we need to create those environment within the home, where the home is a safe place for the child, you know, and that there is relational proximity where it doesn't matter what is being disclosed by a child. It could be the worst of the worst, that the parent is there, being present, being real, just being present, and creating the opportunity for a child to feel safe and not judged, and being able to disclose the enormity of something like a sextortion experience that is ongoing. So I think if there's one special weapon, and dare I say a silver bullet in all of this, it is that relationship with a child that is going to eclipse the ability of the criminals to you know, not just extort, but ending the life of a child. I think the parent there and the relational proximity to the child really is the silver bullet here, because these guys pounce on the fact that there's often that deficit, and that's where children often feel, isolated. Now, this is not a general statement, okay? Sometimes you've got parents and children having very real, amazing relationships, but just in that moment, just being so overwhelmed in the middle of the night, where death by suicide very unfortunately happened. But I do think if there is a silver bullet in all of this, it is the nucleus of the family and the child being able to disclose, and the parent, father, mother, hearing, being present, and accepting that information, non-judgmentally, and saying, this was never supposed to happen to you in the first place. We are here to help. We are here to support. That is the one thing that these criminals don't count on. And that's probably one of the biggest threats to them generating a passive income from a 15-year-old young human. Yeah.
Yeah. So empower the family, talk to your kids. Well, Dr. Marcel van der Watt, I will again link everything in the body of the video. We have so much more to talk about. I thank you for your dedication, commitment, for all of this. I learned so much from you. And then my job is to take your information and then bring it out into the public. And I'm so happy our White House is really getting on board and opening their door. And we're having these conversations. And promise me, I don't have to wait, I don't know, another 6 months for you. But I want to talk to you. There's so much changing. I feel like every single day with all of these issues, we've got to keep up with it and educate the public. So thank you very much. I will speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.